Okay, so believe it or not, this is actually the second time we are making a video about this very player. Last time we spoke about the idea of him being targeted by the Detroit Red Wings, Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as the Boston Bruins? Were they in there too? I think so. Anyways, today we are revisiting the entire idea of this guy heading over to the NHL because in the recent episode of the 32 Thoughts podcast, you had Elliotte Friedman go out there and very particularly call him out. Take a look at this tweet made by Ty. He has a very long thread where he pretty much summarizes the majority of the 32 Thoughts notes. Elliotte Friedman says that KHL winger Maxim Tsyplakov, who had 31 goals this season, is an unrestricted free agent and is closer to picking a team. Friedman mentioned that both the Leafs and the Canadiens are teams that are interested in him. Now again, we did talk about this guy already, so if you did watch that prior video, you kind of know what to expect, but because the last one did not have the Montreal Canadiens angle attached to it, I could understand why some of y'all might want to revisit this guy one more time. So let's go out there and do that. Who is Maxim Tsyplakov? He's a guy who, playing for Spartak Moscow in the KHL this season as a 25-year-old, 6'3", 190-pound left-handed right winger, was indeed one of the top players in points. He had 47 points in 65 games played this season with Spartak Moscow. 31 goals as well is what stands out to most people when they look at his stat line. 31 goals in 65 games played certainly is not bad. Add to this the 4 points that he had in 11 games in the postseason, which admittedly is not the best points per game number, but it's still belonging to a guy who was one of the top goal scorers in the entire KHL. He was actually top 5. Now, I get it. The main thing that might stand out to y'all when you look at the numbers and all the points is, okay, let's just hold our horses here because, as you can see, Maxim Tsyplakov had one more goal than gosh darn Jordan Weal this previous season. Some of the guys who had outscored him include Nikolai Goldobin and Reed Boucher, both of whom had short stints with the Vancouver Canucks that were not very good. A lot of the players in the KHL just aren't quote-unquote good enough to crack an NHL lineup. It's very rare that you see the Artemi Panarins, the Andrei Kuzmenkos, the guys who do come over from the KHL and who are immediate success stories as they were in the KHL. More often than not, you'll find the guys who transition are not really all too great in North American hockey. From the Vadim Shipashevs, to the Nikita Gusevs, to the Jan Kovers, to the Igor Ozhiganovs, a lot of these guys who make their way over just are not good enough to translate their talent from Continental Hockey League play into the National Hockey League. But of course, never say never, right? Sometimes you do end up with the diamond in the rough. The new Andrei Kuzmenko or the new Artemi Panarin. Of course, these situations are few and far between. Not everybody can be a Kirill Kaprizov after all, but it's still worth the risk. Now, if you want to go over into how Tsyplakov plays, why the Leafs or the Canadiens would be interested in bringing this guy onto their team, there's a really good scouting profile published on Montreal Hockey Now from earlier yesterday by Mark Dumont. Of course, you know, Tsyplakov is now linked to the Montreal Canadiens, so obviously everybody in Montreal is going to be thinking about ways to talk about this guy. Dumont writes this about the Montreal Canadiens and Maxim Tsyplakov. This is a player that projects as the exact type of guy that garners interest from Kent Hughes and company. He's big, he knows how to score, and he's young enough that he could fit in within the age groups involved in the team's long-term rebuilding plans. He has a nose for the net and a penchant for heading into the dirty areas on the ice. But for those very reasons, Maxim Tsyplakov has also attracted attention from almost half the teams in the NHL, including the Bruins and the Maple Leafs. Okay, there you go, there's that Boston argument bringing itself back up in here. The Canadiens have a slight edge when it comes to attracting potential forwards, as they can offer a player like Tsyplakov an opportunity to immediately play in the top 6, whereas ice time would be tougher to come by on the team like the Bruins or the Maple Leafs. More to the point, the Habs need to improve their options on the wing, and Tsyplakov as a right winger certainly fits the bill. They also have the financial maneuverability to offer Tsyplakov a healthy contract extension once his one-year ELC expires. Now, to Marc Dumont's credit, he does go out there and talk about the production. He says that, hey, you have to acknowledge that this is a guy who is in the prime of his career. He had the best KHL season he has ever had, and there are players surrounding him in terms of total points that really are not much. And as a result, it's probably better to take more caution when looking at KHL point production and goal scoring numbers than to just think about it, oh yeah, he scored 30 goals in 40 games, he's going to do that in the NHL. Like, it's so difficult to project these numbers across varying leagues. But for Maxim Tsyplakov, this is definitely a guy who, based off of his physical play, his nose for the net, his goal-scoring ability, and the intangibles he brings, would certainly be an option for teams like Boston or Toronto or even Detroit, as we had talked about in the last video, to target in free agency. The Montreal Canadiens getting involved, though, does give this entire conversation a different flavor, because all of a sudden, it's a non-playoff contending-worthy team that is getting their grips on this. All of a sudden, it's no longer, hey Tsyplakov, which playoff contending team do you want to go to help try and win a Stanley Cup with in the bottom 6 role next season? It's, do you want to go with one of those situations, or do you want to go over to the Habs, where your ice time will be a lot more guaranteed, you'll probably get more power play minutes, you'll probably get more points, and Montreal's one of these squads that could give you more money on your next contract after 24-25. There is a big option here, and for Montreal to be building this core of guys that are admittedly kind of all over the place. You've got the small guys like Cole Caulfield, you've got the bigger guys like the Kirby Docs and the Slafkovskys. Tsyplakov could fit right into that bigger core territory. And if everything goes well, I mean, if you have a line of Doc, Slafkovsky, and Tsyplakov, add on a Caden Lindstrom, for example, from the 2024 NHL Draft, then all of a sudden you've got yourselves a core of offensively capable big dudes. Of course, that's assuming that Tsyplakov actually projects and does well in the NHL as he did in the KHL. That's not guaranteed in the slightest. But at the end of the day, this could be a nice value pickup. But you could also say the same thing about the Toronto Maple Leafs. If they're going to be going out there and shelling out salary, they're trading away Marner, they're trading away John Tavares, they're trading away Riley, they're trading away a bunch of dudes. They'll have a lot of money to use elsewhere in their lineup, hopefully not by shelling out $11 million to one guy, but value contracts can still be extraordinarily important here. If the Maple Leafs can find themselves a good goal scorer in a player making pretty much the same amount of money as Michael Bunting was making a few years ago, then that could be a really big add. We've spoken a ton over the past few years about how bad contracts can weigh down teams significantly. And I'm not saying that Marner or Tavares or any of these guys are on bad contracts per se. They're just really, really beefy. And when you add them all together on the same team, it forms a really strange dynamic where everybody else in the lineup is making so little money that it's kind of tough to find the depth to really propel you forward in the playoffs. So if a guy like Tsyplakov chooses Toronto, then that could be a pretty interesting situation too. If they decide to throw the Uno reverse card and say, okay, well, we know that we have a cup contending team, but we're going to trade all these guys away. We want to give you a chance to play with Matthews, or we're going to play you with Nylander. We're going to give you all the opportunities to succeed right away. I know Kyle Dubas is no longer the GM of Toronto, but that was kind of the model that he proposed every single time these Russian dudes came over to the Leafs, right? We're going to give you an opportunity, and if you're good, you'll stick around. If you're not good, though, then we'll find you a new home. We'll trade you to San Jose like Barabanov. We'll trade you to another team where you could actually prosper and get a bigger role. Kyle Dubas was good at that. Of course, Brad Treliving has not really had an opportunity to do something like that yet, but if Tsyplakov is still getting that kind of an expectation from Toronto, then maybe there is reason for him to go over there and potentially get himself a top role on a team that's desperate to win as soon as they can. Or does he drag it out and go with Montreal, where there's a pretty low likelihood of winning in the short term, but maybe an even bigger chance to do some damage in the regular season? So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're a Montreal Canadiens fan or a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, how do you feel about Maxim Tsyplakov being linked to both of your teams? It's Elliot Friedman going out there and talking about this, so there's a good reason to buy into it. Maybe this video is coming out a little bit too late. Maybe the video is outdated by the time this is public on YouTube. Maybe Tsyplakov already signed. Who really knows? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Maxim Tsyplakov and his entire projectability into the NHL. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.